and Craig Smoak.
11 Warriors, and on Twitter at Dan_Hope. It's a website Twitter page that's got, well, the website Twitter page has over 200,000 who follow it. And Dan Hope, of course, joins us from Columbus, Ohio on the weekend of Ohio State Notre Dame. Dan, thanks for your time. It seems like of some of what the game, I call them bangers, like two good, highly ranked teams. And we're talking about two teams in the top five. But it almost feels like everyone just thinks this is a done deal with Ohio State. Do you get that impression?
I think that is what a lot of people think, but I mean, I don't know if that's necessarily what people should think because, like you said, it is two top five teams going into this game and, so many unknowns as the season begins. But, I think a lot of that, stems from the fact that, Ohio State has so much star power returning on offense with C.J. Stroud and Jackson Smith-Njigba and Travion Henderson. And I think the perception out there is that Notre Dame, is not going to have the same kind of offensive firepower to be able to match that.
What would be the thing that trips up the Buckeyes this year if something does?
Well, I think you look at their schedule and, Ohio State is probably going to be favored in every game, but that doesn't mean that it's an easy schedule. I mean, if you look at, starting off with Notre Dame right off the bat, you've got Wisconsin later this month. You go into the month of October, you've got Michigan State, Iowa, Penn State, and then, of course, there's Michigan at the end of the season. This is games everyone's going to be circling on the calendar. So there's a lot of potential roadblocks in there. It's easy to say going into the season, well, they should win every game, but that's a lot easier said than done. And all it takes is one loss, whether it's, this week or at any point in the season, all it takes is one loss, and then all of a sudden you lose your margin for error in terms of trying to make the college football playoff. And so, while, I think, Ohio State is probably going to be favored in every regular season game that's played, I still think there's a lot of hurdles they're going to have to clear to ultimately be able to achieve their goals.
Where does the question of how much Jim Knowles can do in year one rank amongst those mysteries heading into this season?
Oh, I think it's number one for sure after, obviously the defense was a weak point for Ohio State, really the last two seasons, but especially last season. And so I think, that's what everybody in Columbus is really curious about right now is how good is this defense going to be? And is Jim Knowles going to be able to turn it around immediately? Because, obviously we saw what he did at Oklahoma State last year. He had a great defense there, but it took him 4 years to do that. At Ohio State, the expectation is he's able to do that in one. And so we have to see. I mean, he's certainly got more talent to work with at Ohio State than he's ever had before in his career, but he's also never had a defense that's been elite in year one. And so I think, that's the whole question is, can trying to implement a complex scheme, can the extra level of talent that he has in Columbus maybe nullify some of the learning curve that there was in past stops? He's certainly confident. Everybody within the program is certainly confident that that's going to be able to happen, but we got to see it to really know.
So it wasn't a talent issue. It was more of maybe just it not getting through to the players.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what Ohio State has had on defense year in and year out, I mean, they've had 4- and 5-star players on defense. So it's not as if Ohio State didn't have some of the most talented defensive players in the country the last couple of years. They just didn't get those kind of results.
Well, it was a talent that wasn't reaching their potential or overrated getting on campus.
Well, I mean, you could probably look at it from both sides, but I think it's probably more so the first part of it that, you had, a lot of talented players, but the pieces just weren't all coming together.
Mm-hmm.
That, sometimes, if you're not utilizing players in the right way, if you're not putting them in the right spots in the scheme, you can kind of, lessen what they're able to do with their talent. And so I think, really, I think that's mostly what it was the last couple of years is, Ohio State just didn't have the scheme that it needed to match its talent. And I think there's more optimism now that what Ohio State is doing defensively is going to fit the strengths of its players.
Dan, what do you look for from Notre Dame this week to try and throw the kitchen sink at that offense?
Yeah, well, I mean, they have to try everything, right? I mean, they've got a new defensive coordinator too, and Al Golden. So you would think that they're going to have some new wrinkles, but it's tough. It's kind of pick your poison, right? Because you've got, C.J. Stroud, throwing to Jackson and Jigba and some really talented receivers, but, you've also got Travion Henderson, who, is going to be one of the best running backs in the country. And so, when Marcus Freeman met with the media this week, he said that, their top priority was going to be stopping the run. And I think there is logic to that because, if you look at the games Ohio State struggled in last year, it was because they didn't run the ball well. And, that is, I think, the bigger question mark for Ohio State is just, will they be able to, get those tough yards on the ground? And so I think, Notre Dame's going to try to do that and try to limit, Ohio State finishing drives in the red zone, converting those short yardage situations. I think that's what Notre Dame's really going to have to be able to do to stay in this game, because I think, Ohio State's going to hit its big plays with the talent it has in the passing game. I think, Notre Dame's secondary in some respects is going to be overmatched in that regard. But, if Notre Dame can make those key stops, if they can, stop Ohio State from, finishing drives in opposing territory, that could give Notre Dame a chance.
What's the temperature gauge on Ohio State fans' love for Marcus Freeman right now?
Well, it's definitely lukewarm. It's definitely some of the comments that he made, this offseason, certainly, when he was quoted in the Players Tribune as saying, he was glad he didn't make the wrong decision twice. That definitely turned Ohio State fans off. So, I think that he's not coming back as the most beloved son for this game. But, Notre Dame was going to be greeted with boos anyway. So, it's, it's one of those things. I think no matter what, Notre Dame is going to be stepping into a hostile environment, but Marcus Freeman did add a little bit of extra fuel to that fire.
And what incredible timing! Just the fact that that's like how it all starts for him is playing is that's just really cool. That's a fun little subplot to everything.
Yeah, and there's kind of a few of those. There's Al Washington, their defensive line coach. Mm-hmm. He was the linebackers coach at Ohio State last year. James Laurinaitis, who of course was a star at Ohio State, he's now a graduate assistant at Notre Dame. And there was even some, rumors that Notre Dame tried to poach a couple of other Ohio State coaches this offseason. And so it definitely does add a little bit more drama, certainly to the pregame storyline.
So I saw the video that you had put up on your timeline. It's from Ohio State football with C.J. Stroud giving the entire team, was it suits? Is that correct?
He gave them $500 gift cards to go buy suits for one of his sponsors, Express. That's a Columbus-based company. He's actually a brand ambassador for them, along with Jackson Smith and Jigba. And so, through a partnership with them, he was able to get gift cards for everyone on the team.
Well, that's part of the good thing with the NIL. A lot of the good thing with the NIL, but it's neat that he was able to share that with his teammates as well. We mentioned the defense. You've mentioned Jim Knowles, all of that. Is there a player that last year didn't get to do much just because they're so loaded that you are looking forward to maybe the next level or what he can bring to the team?
Yeah, I think two guys really that I'm looking at are at defensive end position. JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer, they're both going into their second year. They were both top 5 overall prospects in their recruiting class last year. Actually, I think the 2 highest rated defensive linemen that Ohio State has ever signed. And so, we saw some flashes from them as freshmen, but didn't really see anything with any consistency. I think those are 2 guys that if this defense is going to reach its potential, they need to emerge. They need to become those next star defensive ends like we've seen from Ohio State in the past with guys like Chase Young and the Bosa brothers. And so I'm really intrigued to see what do we see from them here in this first game, and do they start to break through and become those really disruptive players that Ohio State expects them to be up front.
Dan, thank you. Great stuff. Thank you for being patient with us today, and I hope to have you back on again.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
That's Dan Hope, covers Ohio State 11 Warriors. You spell it out, and then the Twitter feed, I think it's 11W. And good stuff. Ohio State loaded. And now C.J. Stroud begins yet his next journey towards possibility of leading them to a national championship, Big Ten championship, and then maybe the Heisman Trophy. God, he was really